Section 5. The Principles 360-degree Leader Practice to Lead Down. Follow me, I'll add value to you. Leadership is traditionally thought of as a top-down activity. The leader leads, the followers follow. Simple. If you have been leading others for any length of time, you may be tempted to skip this section of the book, thinking, I already know how to do that. I don't want you to miss something really important, however. Because 360-degree leaders are by definition non-positional, they lead through influence, not position, power, or leverage. And they take that approach not only with those above and alongside them, but also with those who work under them. This is what makes 360-degree leaders unique and so effective. They take the time and effort to earn influence with their followers just as they do with those over whom they have no authority. At the heart of this approach with followers is the desire to add value to them. Retired Admiral James B. Stockdale said, "Leadership must be based on goodwill. Goodwill does not mean posturing and, least of all, pandering to the mob. It means obvious and wholehearted commitment to helping followers. We are tired of leaders we fear, tired of leaders we love, and tired of leaders who let us take liberties with them. What we need for leaders are men of the heart who are so helpful that they, in effect, do away with the need of their jobs. But leaders like that are never out of a job, never out of followers. Strange as it sounds, great leaders gain authority by giving it away. As a 360-degree leader, when you lead down, you're doing more than just getting people to do what you want. You're finding out who they are. You're helping them to discover and reach their potential. You're showing the way by becoming a model they can follow. You're helping them become a part of something bigger than they could do on their own. And you're rewarding them for being contributors on the team. In short, you are endeavoring to add value to them in any way you can. Lead down principle number 1: walk slowly through the halls. One of the greatest mistakes leaders make is spending too much time in their offices and not enough time out among the people. Leaders are often agenda-driven, task-focused, and action-oriented because they like to get things done. They hole up in their offices, rush to meetings, and ignore everyone they pass in the halls along the way. What a mistake! First and foremost, leadership is a people business. If you forget the people, you're undermining your leadership, and you run the risk of having it erode away. Then one day when you think you're leading, you'll turn around and discover that nobody is following and you're only taking a walk. Relationship building is always the foundation of effective leadership. Leaders who ignore the relational aspect of leadership tend to rely on their position instead. Or they expect competence to do all the talking for them. True, good leaders are competent, but they are also intentionally connected to the people they lead. One of the best ways to stay connected to your people and keep track of how they're doing is to approach the task informally as you move among the people. As you see people in the parking lot, chat with them. Go to meetings a few minutes early to see people, but don't start in on the agenda until you've had time to catch up. And, as the title of this chapter suggests, take time to walk slowly through the halls. Connect with people and give them an opportunity to make contact with you. When it comes to connecting informally, leaders in the middle of an organization often have a distinct advantage over their leadership counterparts at the top. Leaders in the middle are viewed as more accessible than top leaders. They are perceived as having more time, even if it's not true. And they are seen as more approachable. Their people don't worry about bothering them, and are less reluctant to take their time, unlike people who report directly to the top leader. Walking slowly through the halls is a useful skill for leading down no matter where you are in an organization, but the best time to master it is while you're in the middle, not after you get to the top. To help you develop this skill successfully, here are a few suggestions. 1. Slow down to connect with people. You travel at their speed. When connecting with your leader, chances are you need to speed up. Though it is not always true, in general the higher you go in an organization's hierarchy, the faster the leaders travel. The leader at the top often has boundless energy and is very quick mentally. Conversely, when you move down, people move more slowly. Once again, not everyone will be slower, but in general it is true. People at the bottom don't process information as quickly, and they don't make decisions as fast. Part of that is due to having less information. Some of it comes from having less experience. Most people who want to lead are naturally fast. But if you want to become a better leader, you actually need to slow down. You can move faster alone. You can garner more individual honors alone. But to lead others, you need to slow down enough to connect with them, engage them, and take them with you. If you have children, you instinctively understand this. The next time you need to get something done around the house, try doing it 2 ways. First, have your kids help. That means you need to enlist them. You need to train them. You need to direct them. You need to supervise them. You need to redirect them. You need to recapture and re-enlist them when they wander off. Depending on the ages of your children, it can be pretty exhausting, and even when the work is completed, it may not be to the standard you'd like. Then try doing the task alone. How much faster can you go? How much better is the quality of the work? How much less aggravation is there to deal with? No wonder many parents start off enlisting their children in tasks to teach and develop them, but then throw in the towel after a while and do the work themselves. Working alone is faster, at least in the beginning, but it doesn't have the same return. If you want your children to learn, grow, and reach their potential, you need to pay the price and take the time and trouble to lead them through the process, even when it means slowing down or giving up some of your agenda. It's similar with employees. Leaders aren't necessarily the first to cross the finish line. People who run alone are the fastest. Leaders are the first to bring all of their people across the finish line. The payoff to leadership at work or home comes on the back end. 2. Express that you care. When you go to your mailbox at home, I bet one of the first things you do is shuffle through the various items. What are you on the lookout for? You're probably looking for something with a handwritten envelope, because it's usually a sign that what's inside is something personal from someone you know. We all desire a personal touch from someone who cares about us. I read somewhere that the United States Postal Service delivers 170 billion pieces of mail every year. Yet in this vast sea of mail, less than 4% of the total is comprised of personal letters. That means you have to sort through 100 bills, magazines, bank statements, credit card offers, ads, and other pieces of junk mail to find just 4 items from someone who knows and actually cares about you. The people who follow you also desire a personal touch. They want to know that others care about them. Most would be especially pleased to know that their boss had genuine concern about them and valued them as human beings, not just as workers who can get things done for them or the organization. 3. Create a healthy balance of personal and professional interest. Leaders who show interest in the individuals who work for them need to find the balance between personal and professional interest. Professional interest shows that you have the desire to help them. That is something all good leaders share. Personal interest goes deeper, it shows your heart. When you take interest in your people as human beings, you need to be sure not to cross the line. There is a point at which interest becomes inappropriate. You mustn't be nosy. Your desire should be to help, not to invade someone's privacy or make them feel uncomfortable. Start by asking fairly neutral questions. You can safely ask how someone's spouse or children are doing. You can ask about people's hobbies or other outside interests. Or you can ask a very general question such as, "How is everything else going?" Then pay attention to not only the content of their answer, but also for any kind of emotional reaction. If you sense that there might be something there, then ask a non-threatening follow-up question that asks if everything is okay, but don't push. If they choose to talk, don't judge, don't interrupt, and don't be too quick to offer advice unless they specifically ask for it. Why should you take the time to do this? The reality is that when employees' personal lives are going well, their professional lives often follow suit. What happens at home colors every aspect of people's lives, including their work. If you have an idea where people are personally, you can know what to expect from them at work, and you may get the opportunity to help them along. 4. Pay attention when people start avoiding you. If you make it a habit to walk slowly through the halls, you will get to know your people and the organization better. You will know when things are working. Your leadership intuition will increase, and when something is wrong, you will pick up on it much more quickly. Most people are creatures of habit. They fall into patterns and do things the same way most of the time. As you walk around, you will get used to seeing people. Because you will be seen as approachable, people will come out of their offices or cubicles to chat with you. They'll be visible. If something is wrong with somebody who is normally communicative, that person will suddenly avoid you. So as you walk around, you have to ask yourself, who am I not seeing? Often it's not what people say, it's what they're not saying that is a tip-off that something isn't right. People are always quick to bring good news, but they avoid bringing bad news. I see examples of this all the time in my consulting company, ISS. When we are working with a leader to try to develop a partnership, if that leader intends to sign with us, we hear about it right away. If that leader doesn't, she takes quite a while to make contact with us. A good 360-degree leader always slows down enough to be looking, listening, and reading between the lines. 5. Tend to the people, and they will tend to the business. A 360-degree leader has many exceptional qualities. In fact, value number 5 of the next section of the book outlines those characteristics. But one thing they all have in common is that despite their passion for the vision and their love of action, they give the majority of their effort to the people. Leaders who tend only to business often end up losing the people and the business. But leaders who tend to the people usually build up the people and the business. As you strive to walk slowly through the halls, I want to encourage you to find your own unique way of doing it. Look for practices that fit your personality, working situation, and leadership style. One evening in the fall when I was watching Monday Night Football, I saw a wonderful example of a leader who was doing just that. The halftime feature was about NFL coach Dick Vermeil. He was being interviewed in a studio about his team, the Kansas City Chiefs, and how his season was going, but that's not what intrigued me. Between interview questions, they were showing Vermeil and his team during a practice. As the players stretched during warm-ups, the veteran coach walked up and down the rows of players, chatting with them. He stopped next to one player, and I could hear him ask, "How's your wife doing?" And they dialogued for a while. The interviewer asked Vermeil about his interaction, and he explained that the wife of that player had been fighting lupus. He went on to say that he cares about more than how his players catch the ball or tackle. He interacts with them as people first, then as football players. I've since talked to Dick Vermeil, and he told me that he often has players over to his house, so that they can get to know each other better. What's interesting to me is that when Vermeil came out of retirement to coach the St. Louis Rams in 1997, after a 14-year hiatus, I remember hearing reports that players were skeptical of Vermeil's methods and thought that he was old-fashioned and out of touch. And he kept telling them to just hang in there with him and see what happened. What happened was the team won the Super Bowl in 1999. Will Vermeil win another Super Bowl? I don't know. But I do know this, he has found his own way of walking slowly through the halls that keeps him visible, available, and connected. And because of that, his players respect him and work hard for him because they know he cares about them. A leader can hardly ask for more than that. I lead down principle number 2. See everyone as a 10. Want to ask you a question. Who is your favorite teacher of all time? Think back through all your years in school, from kindergarten to the last year of your education. Who stands out? Is there a teacher who changed your life? Most of us have one. Mine was actually a Sunday school teacher named Glenn Leatherwood. Who was yours? What made that teacher different? Was it subject knowledge? Was it teaching technique? Though your teacher may have possessed great knowledge and mastered outstanding technique, I'm willing to bet that what separated that teacher from all of the others was his or her belief in you. That teacher probably saw you as a 10. The teacher who browbeats you and tells you how ignorant or undisciplined you are isn't the one who inspires you to learn and grow. It's the one who thinks you're wonderful and tells you so. Now I'd like you to think about your working life and the leaders you've worked for over the years. As you think about them, ask yourself the following questions. Who gets my best effort? The leader who believes I'm a 10 or the leader who believes I'm a 2? Who do I enjoy working with? The leader who believes I'm a 10 or the leader who believes I'm a 2? Who is the easiest for me to approach? The leader who believes I'm a 10 or the leader who believes I'm a 2? Who wants the best for me? The leader who believes I'm a 10 or the leader who believes I'm a 2? Who will I learn the most from? The leader who believes I'm a 10 or the leader who believes I'm a 2? 360-degree leaders get more out of their people because they think more of their people. They respect and value them, and as a result, their people want to follow them. The positive, uplifting attitude that they bring to leadership creates a positive working environment where everyone on the team has a place and purpose, and where everyone shares in the win. For some leaders, this is easy and natural, especially if they have positive personalities. I find that people who were greatly encouraged and valued as children often build up others almost instinctively. But it is a skill that can be learned by anyone, and it is a must for anyone who desires to become a 360-degree leader. If you want to really shine in this area, apply the following suggestions when working with your people. 1. See them as who they can become. Author Bennett Cerf wrote that J. William Stanton, who served many years as a representative from Ohio in the United States Congress, treasured a letter he received from the Chamber of Commerce in Painesville, Ohio, dated 1949. The letter declined Stanton's offer to bring a new congressman as the featured speaker for a fundraising dinner. The missive reads, "We feel that this year we really need a big-name speaker who'll be a drawing card, so we're hoping to bag the head football coach at John Carroll University. Thanks anyhow for suggesting Representative John F. Kennedy. Do you have any idea who that coach might have been? I certainly don't. Do you have a potential JFK in your midst? Or a Jack Welch? Or a Mother Teresa?" It's easy to recognize great leadership and great talent once people have already blossomed, but how about before they come into their own? Look for the great potential that is within each person you lead. When you find it, do your best to draw it out. Some leaders are so insecure that when they see a potential all-star, they try to push that person down because they worry that his or her high performance will make them look bad. But 360-degree leaders reach down to lift those people up. They recognize that people with huge potential are going to be successful anyway. The best role they can assume is that of discoverer and encourager. In that way, they add value to them and get to be a positive part of the process of their emergence as leaders. 2. Let them borrow your belief in them. In 1989, Kevin Myers moved from Grand Rapids, Michigan, to Lawrenceville, Georgia, to plant a church. Kevin was a sharp young leader whose future looked bright, and his sponsoring organization, Kentwood Community Church, was glad to support his efforts. Kevin did all the right things as he prepared for the first service of Crossroads Community Church. He spent weeks talking to people in the community, he selected a good location, and he got his volunteers ready. When he opened the doors for the first time, his hopes were crushed as only about 90 people showed up, about a third of what he had expected. It was a major disappointment, because Kevin had been on staff at a large, dynamic growing church, and he had little desire to lead a small congregation. He was determined to persevere, however, figuring that in a year or two, he would get over the hump and build the kind of church that matched his vision. After 3 years of struggle and little growth, Kevin was ready to throw in the towel. He made a trip to Michigan to meet with Wayne Schmidt, his former boss at Kentwood, and the original sponsor of Kevin's church planting endeavor. Feeling like a failure, Kevin explained to Wayne that he needed a job, because he was planning to close down the church in Georgia. Wayne's response changed Kevin's life. He said, "Kevin, if you've lost faith, borrow mine." Uncertain about his future but grateful to Wayne for his faith in him, Kevin returned to Georgia and didn't give up. Slowly, as Kevin grew in his leadership, so did his congregation. As I write this, Kevin leads 3,400 people every week, putting his congregation in the top 1% in the United States. When the people you lead don't believe in themselves, you can help them believe in themselves, just as Wayne did for Kevin. Think of it as a loan, something you are giving freely, but that will later return with dividends as that person succeeds. 3. Catch them doing something right. If you desire to see everyone as a 10 and help them believe in themselves, you need to encourage them by catching them doing something right. And that is really countercultural. We are trained our whole lives to catch people doing something wrong. If our parents and teachers caught us doing something, you can bet it was something wrong. So we tend to think in those same terms. When you focus on the negative and catch people doing something wrong, it has no real power to make them any better. When we catch people doing something wrong, they become defensive. They make excuses. They evade. On the other hand, if we catch people doing something right, it gives them positive reinforcement. It helps them tap into their potential. It makes them want to do better. Make it part of your daily agenda to look for things going right. They don't have to be big things, though of course you want to praise those things as well. It can be almost anything, as long as you are sincere in your praise. 4. Believe the best, give other the benefit of doubt. When we examine ourselves, we naturally give ourselves the benefit of the doubt. Why? Because we see ourselves in the light of our intentions. On the other hand, when we look at others, we usually judge them according to their actions. Think about how much more positive our interaction with others would be if we believed the best in them, and gave them the benefit of the doubt, just as we do for ourselves. Many people are reluctant to adopt this attitude because they fear that others will consider them naive or will take advantage of them. The reality is that trustful people are not weaker than distrustful ones, they are actually stronger. As evidence, I offer the following trust fallacies and the facts that refute them, researched by sociology professor Morton Hunt. Fallacy. Trustful people are more gullible. Fact. Trustful people are no more likely to be fooled than mistrustful ones. Fallacy. Trustful people are less perceptive than mistrustful people of what others are really feeling. Fact. People who scored high on trust are actually better than others at reading people. Fallacy. People with a poor opinion of themselves are more trustful than people with a good opinion of themselves. Fact. The opposite is true. People with high self-esteem are more willing to take emotional risks. Fallacy. Stupid people are trustful, smart people are mistrustful. Fact. People with high aptitude or scholastic scores are no more mistrustful or skeptical than people judged to be less intelligent. Fallacy. Trustful people rely on others to direct their lives for them, mistrustful people rely on themselves. Fact. The opposite is true. People who feel controlled by outside persons and forces are more mistrustful, while those who feel in charge of their lives are more trustful. Fallacy. Trustful people are no more trustworthy than mistrustful people. Fact. Mistrustful people are less trustworthy. Research validates what the ancient Greeks used to say: he who mistrusts most should be trusted least. 2. I'm not saying that you should become like an ostrich and stick your head in the sand. All I'm suggesting is that you give others the same consideration you give yourself. It's not a lot to ask, and the dividends it will pay you relationally can be huge. 5. Realize that 10 has many definitions. What does it mean to be a 10? When you started reading this chapter and I suggested that you see everyone as a 10, did a certain image of a 10 come to mind? And did you immediately start comparing the people who work for you to that image and find them coming up short? I wouldn't be surprised if that were the case, because I think most of us have a pretty narrow view of what constitutes a 10. When it comes to improving in skills, I believe that most people cannot increase their ability beyond about 2 points on a scale of 1 to 10. So, for example, if you were born a 4 when it comes to math, no matter how hard you work at it, you will probably never become better than a 6. But here's the good news. Everybody is exceptional at something, and a 10 doesn't always look the same. In their book Now, Discover Your Strengths, Free Press, 2001, Marcus Buckingham and Donald O. Clifton identify 34 areas of strength that they believe people exhibit: anything from responsibility to WOO, the ability to win over others. And the authors assert that everyone has at least one skill they can perform better than the next 10,000 others. That means they believe everyone can be a 10 in some area. You can always focus on that area when encouraging one of your employees. But let's say you employ someone who does not have any skill that is a 10 or could be developed into a 10. Does that mean you write him off as hopeless? No. You see, there are other non-skill areas where a person can grow into a 10 no matter what his or her starting point is. Areas such as attitude, desire, discipline, and perseverance. If you don't see 10 potential anywhere else, look for it there. 6. Give them the 10 treatment. Most leaders treat people according to the number that they place on them. If employees are performing at an average level, let's say as a 5, then the boss gives them the 5 treatment. But I believe people always deserve their leader's best, even when they are not giving their best. I say that because I believe every person has value as a human being and deserves to be treated with respect and dignity. That doesn't mean you reward bad performance. It just means that you treat people well and take the high road with them, even if they don't do the same for you. It's been my observation that people usually rise to the leader's expectations if they like the leader. If you have built solid relationships with your employees and they genuinely like and respect you, they will work hard and give their best. I've learned a lot of things about leadership from many leaders over the years, but the one I still admire most is my father, John Maxwell. In December 2004, I visited my parents in the Orlando area, and while I was there, I was scheduled to participate in a conference call. Because I needed a quiet place to do it, my dad graciously let me use his office. As I sat at his desk, I noticed a card next to the phone with the following words written in my father's hand: Number 1, build people up by encouragement. Number 2, give people credit by acknowledgement. Number 3, give people recognition by gratitude. I knew in a second why it was there. My father had written it to remind him of how he was to treat people as he spoke on the phone with them. And I was instantly reminded that Dad, more than anyone else, taught me to see everyone as a 10. Begin today to see and lead people as they can be, not as they are, and you will be amazed by how they respond to you. Not only will your relationship with them improve and their productivity increase, but you also will help them rise to their potential and become who they were created to be. Lead down principle number 3. Develop each team member as a person. When Jack Welch was the CEO of General Electric, he famously sought to cut the bottom 10% of performers from his workforce every year. That practice has been criticized by many of his detractors, but isn't it clear why he would do such a thing? It wasn't to be cruel. It was to try to improve the organization. Laying off poor performers is one way to try to help the organization. Recruiting top performers from other organizations is another. Leaders are beginning to see that those are not always the best methods for improvement. A few years ago, I read an article in USA Today that indicated leaders were beginning to see the value of the solid team members they had who were neither stars nor duds. The article termed them B players. It said, when employers aren't busy weeding out the bottom 10% of their workforce, they've been trying to steal the A players from the competition in a battle to lure the best. But some of those employers are coming around to the realization that failure and success might not lie among the weakest and strongest links, but in the solid middle, the B players, the 75% of workers who have been all but ignored. The article went on to say that people in the middle are the backbone of every organization and that they should be valued, which I agree with. But I believe leaders need to take that concept one step further. How do you give your team an edge, helping the B players to perform at their highest level and helping the A players to elevate their game even further? You develop them. There's a lot more to good leadership than just getting the job done. Getting the job done makes you a success. Getting the job done through others makes you a leader. But developing the people while helping them get the job done at the highest level makes you an exceptional leader. When you develop others, they become better, they do the job better, and both you and the organization benefit. Everybody wins. The result? You become the kind of leader that others seek out and want to follow because of the way you add value to people. How to develop your people. Before I make a few recommendations about how to develop others, I need to make clear the difference between equipping people and developing them. When you equip people, you teach them how to do a job. If you show someone how to use a machine or some other device, that's equipping. If you teach someone how to make a sale, that's equipping. If you train them in departmental procedures, that's equipping. You should already be providing training to your people so that they know how to do their jobs. Equipping should be a given, although I know that not all leaders do this well. Development is different. When you develop people, you are helping them to improve as individuals. You are helping them acquire personal qualities that will benefit them in many areas of life, not just their jobs. When you help someone to cultivate discipline or a positive attitude, that's development. When you teach someone to manage their time more effectively or improve their people skills, that's development. When you teach leadership, that's development. What I've found is that many leaders don't have a developmental mindset. They expect their employees to take care of their developmental needs on their own. What they fail to realize, however, is that development always pays higher dividends than equipping because it helps the whole person and lifts him to a higher level. Development is harder to do than equipping, but it is well worth the price. Here's what you need to do as you get started. 1. See development as a long-term process. Equipping is usually a fairly quick and straightforward process. Most people can learn the mechanics of their job very rapidly in a matter of hours, days, or months, depending on the type of work. But development always takes time. Why? Because it requires change on the part of the person being developed, and you just can't rush that. Like the old saying goes, it takes 9 months to produce a baby no matter how many people you put on the job. As you approach the development of your people, think of it as an ongoing process, not something you can do once and then be done. When I led Skyline Church in the San Diego area, I made the development of my staff one of my highest priorities. Some of it I did one-on-one. But I also scheduled a time of teaching for the entire staff every month on topics that would grow them as leaders. It's something I did consistently for a decade. I recommend that you plan to develop the people who work for you. Make it a consistent, regularly scheduled activity. You can ask your staff to read a book every month or two and discuss it together. You can teach a lesson. You can take them to conferences or seminars. Approach the task with your own unique spin. But know this, you cannot give what you do not have. In order to develop your staff, you must keep growing yourself. 2. Discover each person's dreams and desires. When you equip people, you base what you do on your needs or those of the organization. You teach people what you want them to know so that they can do a job for you. On the other hand, development is based on their needs. You give them what they need in order to become better people. To do that well, you need to know people's dreams and desires. Walter Lippmann, founder of the New Republic, said, "Ignore what a man desires, and you ignore the very source of his power." Dreams are the generators of energy with your people. If they have high passion for their dreams, they have high energy. If you know what those dreams are and you develop them in a way that brings those dreams within reach, you not only harness that energy, but you also fuel it. Unfortunately, some leaders don't like to see others pursuing their dreams because it reminds them of how far they are from living their dreams. As a result, these types of leaders try to talk people out of reaching for their dreams, and they often do it using the same excuses and rationalizations they give themselves. If you have found yourself resenting the dreams of others and trying to talk them out of pursuing them, then you need to rekindle the fire you have for your own dreams and start pursuing them again. When a leader is learning, growing, and pursuing his own dreams, he is more likely to help others pursue their own. 3. Lead everyone differently. One of the mistakes rookie leaders often make is that they try to lead everyone the same way. But let's face it, everyone doesn't respond to the same kind of leadership. You should try to be consistent with everyone. You should treat everyone with kindness and respect. But don't expect to use the same strategies and methods with everyone. You have to figure out what leadership buttons to push with each individual person on your team. One person will respond well to being challenged, another will want to be nurtured. One will need the game plan drawn up for him, another will be more passionate if she can create the game plan herself. One will require consistent, frequent follow-up, another will want breathing room. If you desire to be a 360-degree leader, you need to take responsibility for conforming your leadership style to what your people need, not expecting them to adapt to you. 4. Use organizational goals for individual development. If you have to build a mechanism that is entirely separate from the actual work that needs to get done in order to develop your people, it's probably going to wear you out and frustrate you. The way to avoid that is to use organizational goals as much as possible for people's individual development. It's really the best way to go. When it's bad for the individual and bad for the organization, everyone loses. When it's good for the individual but bad for the organization loses. When it's bad for the individual but good for the organization loses. When it's good for the individual and good for the organization, everyone wins. I know this may seem a little simplistic, but I want you to notice one thing. The only scenario where there are no losses is when something is good for the organization and the individual. That's a recipe for long-term success. The way to create this kind of win is to match up three things: a goal, find a need or function within the organization that would bring value to the organization; a strength, find an individual on your team with a strength that needs developing that will help to achieve that organizational goal; an opportunity, provide the time, money, and resources the individual needs to achieve the goal. The more often you can create alignments like this, the more often you will create wins for everyone: the organization, the individual to be developed, and you. 5. Help them know themselves. I always operate on the basic principle that people don't know themselves. A person can't be realistic about his potential until he is realistic about his position. In other words, you have to know where you are before you can figure out how to get someplace else. Max Dupree, Chairman Emeritus of Herman Miller Incorporated and a member of Fortune magazine's National Business Hall of Fame, said that it is the first responsibility of a leader to define reality. I believe it is the first responsibility of a leader who develops others to help them define the reality of who they are. Leaders help them recognize their strengths and weaknesses. That is critical if we want to help others. 6. Be ready to have a hard conversation. There is no development without hard lessons. Almost all growth comes when we have positive responses to negative things. The more difficult the thing is to deal with, the more we need to push in order to grow. The process is often not very pleasant, but you always have to pay a price for growth. Good leaders are willing to have hard conversations to start the growth process for the people under their care. A friend told me the story of a former U.S. Army officer who was working in a Fortune 500 company. The man was repeatedly passed over when the organization's leaders were seeking and recruiting employees with leadership potential to advance in the organization, and he couldn't understand why. His performance record was good, his attitude was positive, and he possessed experience. So what was the problem? The former officer possessed some peculiar personal habits that made others uncomfortable around him. When he became stressed, he hummed. When he became especially agitated, he sat on his hands. He wasn't aware that he did these things, and nobody ever pointed out the distracting and unprofessional nature of these peculiar habits. People simply wrote him off as being odd. Fortunately, the man finally worked for a leader who was willing to have a hard conversation with him. The leader made him aware of the problem, he broke the habit, and today he is a senior leader in that organization. When you don't want to have a difficult conversation, you need to ask yourself, is it because it will hurt them or hurt me? If it is because it will hurt you, then you're being selfish. Good leaders get past the discomfort of having difficult conversations for the sake of the people they lead and the organization. The thing you need to remember is that people will work through difficult things if they believe you want to work with them. 7. Celebrate the right wins. Leaders who develop others always want to help their people get wins under their belts, especially when they are just starting out. But a strategic win always has greatest value. Try to target wins based on where you want people to grow and how you want them to grow. That will give them extra incentive and encouragement to go after the things that will help them improve. It really does matter how you set up these wins. A good win is one that is not only achieved, but also approached in the right way. If someone you're leading goes about an activity all wrong, but somehow gets the right results, and you celebrate it, you're setting up that person to fail. Experience alone isn't a good enough teacher, evaluated experience is. As the leader, you need to evaluate what looks like a win to make sure it is actually teaching what your employee needs to learn in order to grow and develop. 8. Prepare them for leadership. In an organizational context, no development process would be complete without the inclusion of leadership development. The better your people are at leading, the greater potential impact they will have on and for the organization. But that means more than just teaching leadership lessons or asking people to read leadership books. It means taking them through a process that gets them ready to step in and lead. The best process I know is like on-the-job training where people work side by side. Imagine that I wanted to prepare you for leadership. This is how we would proceed. I do it. The process begins with my knowing how to do something myself. I cannot give what I do not possess myself. I do it and you watch. After I have mastered the process, I take you with me and ask you to watch. I explain what I'm doing. I encourage you to ask questions. I want you to see and understand everything I'm doing. You do it and I watch. You can only learn so much from watching. At some point you have to jump in and actually try it. When you reach this stage and start doing it yourself, my role is to encourage you, gently correct you, and redirect you as needed. You do it. As soon as you have the fundamentals down, I step back and give you some room so that you can master it and start to develop your own style and methods. You do it and someone else watches. The last thing I need to do in the development process is help you find someone to develop and encourage you to get started. You never really know something until you teach it to someone else. Besides, the process isn't really complete until you pass on what you've received to someone else. If you dedicate yourself to the development of people and commit to it as a long-term process, you will notice a change in your relationships with the people who work with you. They will develop a strong loyalty to you because they know that you have their best interests at heart and you have proven it with your actions. And the longer you develop them, the longer they are likely to stay with you. Knowing this, don't hold on to your people too tightly. Sometimes the best thing you can do for people is to let them spread their wings and fly. But if you have been diligent in the development process and help them to pass on what they've learned, someone else will step up and take their place. When you continually develop people, there is never a shortage of leaders to build the organization and help you carry the load. Lead down principle number 4: place people in their strength zones. Most leaders agree that having the right people on the team and putting those people in the right places are important. But how much of a difference does it make, really? Are we talking about a small difference or a big one? That's what the people at the Gallup organization asked themselves while doing research for Now, Discover Your Strengths. Here is what the book's authors learned. In our latest meta-analysis, the Gallup organization asked this question of 198,000 employees working in 7939 business units within 36 companies. At work, do you have the opportunity to do what you do best every day? We then compared the responses to the performance of the business units and discovered the following. When employees answered strongly agree to this question, they were 50% more likely to work in business units with lower employee turnover, 38% more likely to work in more productive business units, and 44% more likely to work in business units with higher customer satisfaction scores. That is a highly significant difference. What percentage of workers do you think are working in their areas of strength? According to the authors, the answer is only 20%. The number one reason people don't like their jobs is that they are not working in the area of their strengths. When employees are continually asked to perform in an area of weakness, they become demoralized, they are less productive, and they eventually burn out. Whose fault is that? Usually, it is their leader's fault. Successful people find their own strength zones. Successful leaders find the strength zones of the people they lead. Individuals may seek a job with a particular organization, but they generally don't place themselves in their positions at work. For the most part, their leaders are the ones who do that. When you place individuals in their strength zones, a couple of things happen. First, you change people's lives for the better. In an earlier chapter, I mentioned that people's personal lives color every aspect of their existence, including work. The reverse is also true. People's work lives color the other aspects of their lives. When you put people in their strength zones, their jobs become rewarding and fulfilling. It often makes the difference between someone who hates going to work and someone who loves it. The other benefit is that you help the organization and you. Steps for placing people in their strength zone. The ability to help people find their best place in their careers is an awesome power and a great responsibility, one that we should not take lightly as leaders. As you think about the people who work for you, try to do the following for each individual. 1. Discover their true strengths. Most people do not discover their strengths on their own. They often get drawn into the routine of day-to-day living and simply get busy. They rarely explore their strengths or reflect on their successes or failures. That's why it is so valuable for them to have a leader who is genuinely interested in them, help them to recognize their strengths. There are many helpful tools available that you can use to aid people in the process of self-discovery. I've already mentioned the work of Buckingham and Clifton. Their book, Now, Discover Your Strengths, and the Strengths Finder material on their website can be helpful. So can personality tests such as DISC or Myers-Briggs. And there are many vocational tests as well. Whatever works in the context of your organization can be helpful. But don't limit yourself to tests. Often the most valuable help you can give will be based on your personal observations. 2. Give them the right job. Moving someone from a job they hate to the right job can be life-changing. One executive I interviewed said he moved a person on his staff to 4 different places in the organization, trying to find the right fit. Because he'd placed her wrong so many times, he was almost ready to give up on her. But he knew she had great potential, and she was right for the organization. Finally, after he found the right job for her, she was a star. Because this executive knows how important it is to have every person working in the right job, he asks his staff once a year, if you could be doing anything, what would it be? From their answers, he gets clues about any people who may have been miscast in their roles. Trying to get the right person in the right job can take a lot of time and energy. Let's face it. Isn't it easier for a leader to just put people where it is most convenient and get on with the work? Once again, this is an area where leaders' desire for action works against them. Fight against your natural tendency to make a decision and move on. Don't be afraid to move people around if they're not shining the way you think they could. 3. Identify the skills they will need and provide world-class training. Every job requires a particular set of skills that employees must possess in order to be really successful. Even someone with great personal strengths and a great fit will not truly be working in his strength zone if he doesn't have these skills. As the leader, it is your job to make sure your people acquire what they need to win. 2 of the most important questions to ask are, what am I doing to develop myself? What am I doing to develop my staffs? The first question determines your personal potential and ongoing capacity to lead. The second determines the potential of your team. If they aren't growing, then they will not be any better tomorrow than they are today. In the 17 indisputable laws of teamwork, the law of the niche says, all players have a place where they add the most value. Whatever that niche is determines the best role that person should assume on your team. And it really does make a difference. When leaders really get this, the teams they lead perform at an incredible level. And it reflects positively on those leaders. I don't think it is an exaggeration to say that the success of a leader is determined more by putting people into their strength zones than by anything else. When I was in high school, I was fortunate to have a coach who understood this. During one of our varsity basketball practices, our coach, Don Neff, decided he wanted to teach us a very important lesson about basketball. He got the first and second string teams out on the floor to scrimmage. That wasn't unusual, we scrimmaged all the time. Our second team had some good players, but clearly the first team was much better. This time he had us do something very different from the norm. He let the second string players take their normal positions, but he assigned each of us starters to a different role from our usual one. I was normally a shooting guard, but for this scrimmage I was asked to play center. And as I recall, our center was put in the point guard position. We were instructed to play to 20, but the game didn't take long. The second team trounced us in no time. When the scrimmage was over, Coach Neff called us over to the bench and said, having the best players on the floor isn't enough. You have to have the best players in the right positions. I never forgot that lesson. And as I've led people over the last 30 years, I've applied it to much more than basketball. It doesn't matter what kind of a team you're leading. If you don't place people in their strength zones, you're making it almost impossible for them and you to win. Lead down principle number 5: model the behavior you desire. One of my favorite leadership books is Learning to Lead, Word, 1986, by Fred Smith. I remember very vividly where I was when I first read it. I was on a plane flying back to San Diego. It stands out in my memory because when I read his ideas on incarnational leadership, I pulled out a legal pad to begin brainstorming. In the book, Fred said that when a leader's identity and actions are consistent, the results he gets are consistent. When they are inconsistent, then so are the results. On my legal pad, I created 3 columns. At the top of the first, I wrote what I am. There I intended to write down the qualities I desired to embrace as a leader. At the top of the second column, I wrote what I do, the actions that would be consistent with each character trait. The third column contained the results of consistent character and behavior. What I am, what I do, results. Character-driven, do right, credibility, relational care, community, encourager, believe in people, high morale, visionary, set goals, direction, student, learn, growth, inspiring, motivate, action, selfless, focus on others, reaching out, confident, make decisions, security. A list like this can be a real eye-opener, because when we don't get the results we want, we are often tempted to try to place the blame outside of ourselves. The leader's impact. Just as consistency can create power in your personal life, it can also create power in your leadership. Leaders set the tone and the pace for all the people working for them. Therefore, they need to be what they want to see. Let me explain how this works. Your behavior determines the culture. One of the easiest places to see distinct cultures is in sports. For example, think about the NFL's Oakland Raiders. For years they have prided themselves on their bad boy image. Their owner, Al Davis, is a renegade. Their players are tough guys. Even their fans follow suit. During a game, just look at the area in their stadium that they call the black hole. Your culture determines whom you attract. The behavior of that team for decades has created its culture. Think about another team in the NFL, the Dallas Cowboys. For a long time, the team was a perennial winner, and for years the Cowboys were called America's team. Tom Landry, the team's coach at that time, helped to create that culture. After Landry left the team, the behavior of the coaches and players began to change, and so did the culture. Nobody except maybe an occasional Texan calls the Cowboys America's team anymore. If you desire to instill a particular value into your organization's culture, then you need to ask yourself whether it is an identifiable behavior among the people of your organization, starting with yourself. And the only way to change the culture is to change your behavior. Your attitude determines the atmosphere. Have you ever worked for someone who had a glass is half empty kind of attitude? No matter what the circumstances, the outlook was gloomy. It is night and day different from working for someone whose attitude is upbeat and optimistic. The happiest people don't necessarily have the best of everything. They just make the best of everything. The leader's attitude is like a thermostat for the place she works. If her attitude is good, the atmosphere is pleasant, and the environment is easy to work in. But if her attitude is bad, the temperature is insufferable. Nobody wants to work in an environment that is overheated or icy cold. Your values determine the decisions. Roy Disney, brother and partner of Walt Disney, said, "It's not hard to make decisions when you know what your values are." Not only is that true, but I'd add that it's also not hard to stay with the decisions you make when they are based on your values. Decisions that are not consistent with our values are always short-lived. Whatever you embrace will come out in the decisions of your people. If you value shortcuts, then your employees will make decisions that value speed over quality. If you are insensitive to others' feelings, then your staff will make decisions that don't take people's feelings into account. If you exhibit even the slightest tolerance for dishonesty, then you can bet that someone on the team will think it is okay to make decisions that violate the standards of integrity. Your investment determines the return. Just like in the world of finance, the only way you get a return with people is to make an investment in them. The seeds you sow determine the harvest you reap. Our problem is that we often focus on the reaping rather than the sowing. I've already written about the importance of developing and equipping employees, so I don't need to say a lot more here. I'll give you just one thought: what's worse than training your people and losing them? Not training them and keeping them. Your character determines the trust. Do people trust you? Are the people who work for you quick to believe that you have their best interests at heart? Or do they question your intentions and weigh your motives when you introduce them to a new idea? The answers to those questions can be traced back to your character. Trust is not given, nor can it be assumed simply because you have a leadership position with others. Trust has to be earned, and it usually comes when you are tested. Whether you pass or fail the test is almost always determined by your character. And here's the really tough thing. When you went to school, 60% was probably a passing grade, or if your school had particularly high standards, maybe 70%. When it comes to trust, the only passing grade is 100%. If people can't trust you all of the time, then they will consider you untrustworthy. Your work ethic determines the productivity. I love the story of the crusty old Scotsman who worked hard and expected the people he led to do the same. His workers would tease, "Hey Scotty, don't you know that Rome wasn't built in a day?" I know that," he would answer. "But I wasn't the foreman on that job." Leaders truly do set the tone on the job when it comes to productivity. Employees soon feel very uncomfortable if they are lax in their work ethic, but they can see their boss working diligently. Employees who possess strong character quickly feel prompted to pick up the pace. Thomas Jefferson said, "It's wonderful how much can be done if we are always working." If you want your people to always be working, you had better be too. Your growth determines the potential. The most important leadership lesson I teach is the law of the lid. Leadership ability determines a person's level of effectiveness. If your leadership is a 5, on a scale from 1 to 10, then your effectiveness will be no greater than a 5. Leadership is the glass ceiling of personal achievement. The same is true of the people you lead. Your leadership, if it is not continually growing, can be a lid to the potential of your people. Why? Because you teach what you know, but you reproduce what you are. You can't give people what you do not have. If you want to increase the potential of your team, you need to keep growing yourself. One of my favorite examples of leadership modeling can be found in the story of David, king of ancient Israel. Most people are familiar with the story of David and Goliath. During a war between the Hebrew and Philistine peoples, Goliath, a warrior giant, challenged any individual who would fight him to a winner-take-all battle. Saul, Israel's king, cowered in his tent, and so did his army. But David, a shepherd boy whose older brothers stood among the cowards, challenged Goliath and defeated him in combat. The incident is often recounted as a children's story. Most people familiar with the Bible know that David became king. What many don't know is that in the years before he ascended the throne, David drew warriors to him and created a strong private army. And those warriors became like David, to the point where several of them also became giant killers. Though the results are not always that dramatic, it is always true that followers become like their leaders. They are influenced by their leaders' values. They adopt their working methods. They even emulate many of their quirks and habits. That's why we must always be aware of our own conduct before criticizing the people who work for us. If you don't like what your people are doing, first take a look at yourself. Lead down principle number 6. Transfer the vision. Let's say that you're doing a good job as a 360-degree leader, and you're leading down effectively. You're modeling the way. You're developing relationships with your people and building them up. You've trained them. You're developing them and plan to continue doing so. Now what? It's like you've taken the time to build a fine weapon and load it. So what do? You aim at the bullseye and pull the trigger. In the area of leadership, that means transferring the vision. If you were the leader at the top of the organization, you would be transferring your own vision. As a leader in the middle of the organization, you will be transferring what is primarily the vision of others, as we discussed in Section 2, Lead Up Principle number 6, the Vision Challenge. Leaders in the middle are the crucial link in that process. The vision may be cast by the top leaders, but it rarely gets transferred to the people without the wholehearted participation of the leaders lower in the organization who are closer to them. Though leaders in the middle may not always be the inventors of the vision, they are almost always its interpreters. So how do 360-degree leaders interpret the vision in a way that fires up the people and sets them off in the right direction? If you include the following 7 elements, you will be well on your way to hitting the target. 1. Clarity. When I lived in San Diego, I used to go to a lot of Padres baseball games. I had great seats right behind the dugout. Back then, the team wasn't very good, and the organization would do a number of promotions, games, and activities to try to keep the crowd engaged. One of the regular things they would do between 2 of the innings was a fan game where they would put a player's picture on the big screen in the stadium. But they didn't put the picture up all at once. They had divided it into about a dozen sections, and they would put up one piece at a time until finally the whole picture was complete. I know that's not very exciting. What was really interesting to me was the crowd's reaction. You could tell by the sound of their reactions when people would get it. Early on, there was anticipation, but you could tell that nobody knew whose picture it was because it was just too disjointed and incomplete. Then you'd start to hear a murmur that was the sound of the really quick people getting it. Then it would get a little louder as more got it, and suddenly, it got very noisy. That was when most of the people in the stadium had the picture. The casting of vision is very similar. If the vision isn't clear, the people aren't clear. They just can't figure it out. You have to put all the pieces together for them to help them get it. When preparing to cast vision, ask yourself, what do I want them to know, and what do I want them to do? And once you know the answer, keep communicating and filling in the blanks until you can sense that most of your people get it, not just the quick ones. 2. Connection of past, present, and future. I've noticed that most people who cast vision focus almost entirely on the future. On one level, that makes sense. After all, vision is by its very nature focused on the future. But any leader who casts vision and neglects to tie in the past and present is really missing an opportunity. Talking only about the past gives no hope for the future, so you certainly don't want to put your focus there. But if you ignore the past, you fail to connect people to the organization's history. If you show that you value what has gone before and honor the people who laid the foundation to get you where you are today, you validate those people who have worked hard and sacrificed to build what already exists. You also give the people who are new to the process the added security of knowing they are part of something bigger. When people are able to touch the past, they will be more inclined to reach for the future. Anytime you can show that the past, present, and future are unified, you bring power and continuity to your vision casting. 3. Purpose. Although vision tells people where they need to go, purpose tells them why they should go. Not only does that help people to make sense of what they are being asked to do, but it also helps them to stay on target. It helps them to make adjustments, improvise, and innovate as they encounter obstacles or experience other difficulties. 4. Goals. In leadership, historian and political scientist James McGregor Burns writes, leadership is leaders inducing followers to act for certain goals that present the values and the motivations, the wants and needs, the aspirations and expectations of both leaders and followers. Harper Perennial, 1978. Without goals and a strategy to achieve them, vision isn't measurable or attainable. I've met many leaders over the years who had a pie-in-the-sky idea, but little more than hope when it came to figuring out how to get there. Hope is not a strategy. When you give people a process, they realize that the vision is realistic. And that increases their confidence in you and the vision. 5. A challenge. Just because you make the vision realistic doesn't mean you can't make it challenging. In fact, if vision doesn't require people to stretch, they may wonder if it is worthy of their dedication. Some leaders seem to be afraid to challenge their teams, but a challenge makes good people want to spread their wings and fly. It fires up the committed people and fries the uncommitted ones. You will accurately define your people if you ask them to stretch. 6. Stories. If you want to put a human face on a challenging vision, then include stories. They make the vision relational and warm. Think about people who have been involved in the advancement of the organization so far. Tell about their struggles and victories. Praise their contributions. Make it personal. When you do that, you make the vision and the process identifiable to the average people who are wondering, should I be a part of this? Can I be a part of this? Can I make a difference? A story helps them to see that even though they may have to reach to help achieve the vision, it is within their grasp. 7. Passion. The final piece of the vision puzzle is passion. If there is no passion in the picture, then your vision isn't transferable, it is just a pleasant snapshot. Who's going to work hard, put in long hours, fight through obstacles, and go the extra mile for that? The wonderful thing about passion is that it is contagious. If you are fired up, then they will get fired up, and they will need that fire to keep them going. There is definitely a link between ownership and success. You don't get the latter without the former, and 360-degree leaders cultivate the ownership. They take the vision from me to we. The best person I've ever had on my staff when it came to the transfer of the vision was Dan Ryland. When I was at Skyline Church, Dan was my executive pastor. He did a great job of transferring the vision with the staff, but what impressed me most was the way he did it with the lay people in the congregation. For more than a decade, Dan led a class here of young professional couples called Joint Venture. The people he attracted were really the up-and-coming leaders of the organization. During the last 5 years I was at Skyline, I think every new board member emerged from the ranks of Dan's leadership. Every year at Christmas, Dan invited me to speak at Joint Venture's big Christmas party. It was always a first-class affair. It was usually hosted at a nice hotel or conference center, the food was great, and everybody was dressed to the nines. The ladies were in evening wear, many of the men in tuxes. It became a tradition that they were the first group of people in the congregation to whom I would cast vision for the coming year. There were 2 reasons I did that. First, there were many influencers in that group. The second reason was that they always got it. They were right there tracking with me. Why? Because they were like their leader, Dan, who was continually transferring my vision to them the other 51 weeks of the year. I feel certain that the church would not have moved as quickly as it did if Dan hadn't been such a good leader in the middle of the organization. People say that the bigger a ship is, the harder it is to turn. That may be true of ships, but it's really different in organizations. An organization is one big entity that has many small ones in it. If every leader in the middle of the organization is a 360-degree leader who excels at transferring the vision to the crew in their area, then even a huge organization would be able to turn very quickly. It is not the size of the organization that matters, it is the size of leaders within it. Lead down principle number 7: Reward for results. Man was enjoying an afternoon in a small fishing boat on a peaceful lake. He fished as he munched on a chocolate bar. The weather was perfect, his cell phone was turned off, and all he could think about was how happy he was. Just then he spotted a snake in the water with a frog in its mouth. He felt sorry for the frog, so he scooped up the snake with his landing net, took the frog out of its mouth, and tossed it to safety. Then he felt sorry for the snake. He broke off a piece of his chocolate bar, gave it to the snake, and placed it back in the water, where it swam away. There, he thought. The frog is happy, the snake is happy, and now I'm happy again. This is great. He cast his line back into the water, and then settled back again. A few minutes later, he heard a bump on the side of the boat. He looked over the side, and there was the snake again. This time it had 2 frogs in his mouth. The moral of the story is this: be careful what you reward, because whatever gets rewarded gets done. I'm guessing that as a leader you are probably strongly aware of this truth. And it doesn't matter if the thing that gets rewarded is positive or negative. Whatever actions leaders reward will be repeated. That's why it's very important to reward results, and to do it the right way. When you use every tool at your disposal to reward your people, you not only inspire them to do the things that are right for the organization, but also to work harder and to feel better about the job they're doing. Rewarding for results makes you a more effective and more influential 360-degree leader. To reward results most effectively, follow these 7 principles. 1. Give praise publicly and privately. The place to start when it comes to rewarding others is with your praise. You cannot praise too much. Billy Hornsby, Equip's European coordinator, advised, "It's okay to let those you lead outshine you, for if they shine brightly enough, they reflect positively on you." In 25 Ways to Win with People, Les Parrott and I explain the importance of praising people in front of other people. The more important the audience hearing the praise to the people receiving it, the more valuable it is. But I want to suggest that before you praise people publicly, first praise them privately. Doing that gives what you say integrity. People know you're not just trying to manipulate them by saying something kind. Besides, most of the time when people are praised privately, inside they wish others were there to hear it. If you praise privately first and then do it publicly, it is doubly important because it fulfills the longing they had for others to hear it. 2. Give more than just praise. Now that I've encouraged you to praise people, I need to tell you that you have to give them more than just praise. If you praise them but don't raise them, it won't pay their bills. If you raise them but don't praise them, it won't cure their ills. Talk is cheap unless you back it up with money. Good leaders take good care of their people. If you really think about it, the people who cost the organization the most aren't the ones who get paid the most. The ones that cost the most are the people whose work doesn't rise to the level of their pay. When the pay that people receive doesn't match the results they achieve, then they become highly discouraged. If that happens under your watch as a leader, it will not only take a toll on your people's effort, but it will also take a toll on your leadership. One leader I interviewed said he once relocated to the northwestern United States to take a job running a dwindling department in an organization. In 9 months' time, he doubled the impact of his department. When he went for his annual review, his performance was totally ignored. He was told the staff was getting a blanket 5% increase in salary. That was hard to swallow, because he was to be rewarded the same as the other departmental leaders, even the ones who hadn't made any kind of significant improvement in their areas. But he became even more demoralized that his increase would be prorated down to 3.75% because he hadn't been there the whole year. Talk about taking the wind out of a person's sails. 3. Don't reward everyone the same. That brings me to my next point. If you want to be an effective leader, you cannot reward everyone the same way. This is a major pressure for most leaders. All but the top people in an organization want everyone to be treated the same way. They say that they want everything to be fair. But is it fair for someone who produces twice the revenue of her counterpart to be paid the same? Should the person who carries the team be paid the same as the one he has to continually carry? I don't think so. Mick Delaney said, "Any business or industry that pays equal rewards to its goof-offs and its eager beavers sooner or later will find itself with more goof-offs than eager beavers." So how do you go about addressing the pressure to be fair while still rewarding results? Praise effort, but reward only results. Since whatever gets rewarded gets done, if you continually praise effort and do it for everyone, people will continue to work hard. If they are working in their strength zones and keep working hard, they will eventually achieve good results. At that time, reward them financially. Give perks beyond pay. Let's face it. Leaders in the middle of an organization often have limitations on how they can reward people financially. So what is a 360-degree leader to do? Reward people with perks. What would it be like if you had a special reserved parking place, but gave it to one of your employees for a week or a month? What kind of an impression would that make on the person who received it? Anything you get as a perk you can share with the people who work with you, whether it's a parking place, free tickets to an event, or use of the corporate suite. Another area where you can share your wealth is in your relationships. It requires a secure leader to do so, but if you introduce your employees to friends, acquaintances, and professionals who might interest or benefit them, they will feel rewarded and grateful. Finally, though this may seem a little odd, I want to recommend that you try to extend perks or acknowledgement to your employees' family members, when appropriate. They are often the ones who make great sacrifices for the work to get done, especially during a crisis. One leader I interviewed told me a story that affirmed the positive impact of such an acknowledgement. He said his organization's lighting system had crashed 2 weeks prior to a planned production. For the performance to go on, the entire system had to be replaced in a week's time, and he was set to oversee the job. To make matters worse, the whole thing happened in December, as Christmas approached. This leader started preparations a week before the installation, and once the electrician arrived to start the job, he didn't leave his side. He knew that if he went home while the crew was working, progress would stall. He worked more than 100 hours that week, ate every meal at work, and never saw his kids the entire week. He completed the work on Sunday, and then reported to work the next morning. His boss had a surprise for him. Knowing that the leader had missed spending time with his 5-year-old son, his boss arranged for his son to attend an important staff meeting that was planned for that morning. As the adults met, the boy sat on his father's lap and colored. The leader later told me, "Bonuses are wonderful. Gifts are great. But that moment, appreciating my sacrifice to my family, meant more than anything." 5. Promote when possible. If you have the choice to promote someone from within or bring in someone from outside, all other factors being equal, promote from within. Few things reward an employee the way a promotion does. A promotion says, "You've done a good job, we believe you can do even more, and here is a reward for your performance." And the best promotions are the ones that don't need to be explained, because everyone who works with the ones being promoted have seen them grow into their new jobs. 6. Remember that you get what you pay for. Not long ago, I invited a young leader to attend a roundtable discussion with leaders of large churches from my area. Forums like these are really beneficial because leaders on a similar level can talk about their struggles, share information, and learn things from each other. At one point in the discussion, the leaders talked about staffs and budgets. They went around the table, sharing the percentage of their budgets that were spent on staff. When it was this young leader's turn to talk, he quickly changed the subject. Later, when I talked to him, he told me that as they talked, he realized that he was underpaying his staff because the percentage of his budget was very low. He went home after that meeting, met with his church's board, and radically changed their pay scale. He says that his church now has the best team it's ever had, and it is worth every penny. He doesn't ever want to lose a valuable team member because of pay. A leader may be able to hire people without paying them a lot of money. And occasionally, it may be possible to keep a few good people while not paying them very well. But in the long run, you get what you pay for. If you want to attract and keep good people, you need to pay them what they're worth. Otherwise, you will end up with people who are worth what you pay. When you were a kid in science class, did you ever work with an old-fashioned balance? I mean the kind like the scales held in the hand of blind justice at courthouses. They're made up of two shallow dishes suspended from chains from a lever. If you put something that weighs an ounce in one dish, then you need to put something that weighs the same in the other dish for it to level out. Leadership is like one of those scales. The rewards leaders give are counterbalanced by the results that their people give in return. In an organization, the scales are always moving, weighing more heavily on one side or the other. The scales naturally seek equilibrium where they are level, and they will not stay out of balance permanently. Leaders always want greater results because that is where the fulfillment of the vision comes from. The impact, profits, and success of an organization all come from this. As a leader, you have a choice. You can try to push your employees to give more, hoping to swing the balance in your favor. Or you can load up the rewards side, which is the only side you really have significant influence over, and wait for the balance to swing back to level as your employees respond by producing more. That's what 360-degree leaders do. They focus on what they can give, not what they can get. By giving more, they get more, and so do their people.